you can concentrate on what you're talking about. And anyway, just welcome back, everybody. I know we're kind of a few days early from the actual true start of the semester, but either way, we couldn't help that little change that happened, and I think it's too much to try to coordinate it and push it off a week. So we just decided to stick with it. Jay, we're really thankful for you coming on board and helping us out here, and hopefully even if we don't get more people checked in, we can let them watch it as a recorded video. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Killough. So please share what you got about our CVs and resumes.
Excellent. Well, oh, hey, Dr. Alexander, how are you? Just popped in right as we started. And
there's our first pet.
There we go. Yes, check mark.
We're good.
So good evening, everybody. Yes, CVs, I've been working in the University Career Center for about 18 years. And the first time I ever critiqued a CV, I was probably 25. I don't believe I had started my PhD program yet in Family Consumer Sciences Education. And it was a chemistry professor who was looking to change jobs. And so I told him, sure, I'd be happy to critique your CV without a full understanding. I knew what a CV was, but I didn't really understand I'd never really seen one, and mine was not developed at that point. And he brought his CV in, and it was 65 pages of chemistry and a bunch of research and a bunch of classes taught, and none of it made sense to me. And so I started looking through it, and I started noticing that his format, he had quite a few misspellings. You could tell that every time he published, every time he taught a class, he added it to his CV. And he didn't really pay much attention to the details. And so what I learned from that, I told him, I have no idea what kind of research you do in chemistry. But what I do know is that if another university is going to read your CV, one of the things they're going to look at is your attention to detail. And so we need to fix these misspellings. So tonight, we're going to cover a couple of things about your CV, because from what I understand about CVs from working with faculty all over campus, not just in Family Consumer Sciences Education, but CVs, there's no standard format. It's really dependent upon your program. It depends on really what you are required to do for your field. And so I'm going to cover some basics today of kind of what I see in CVs, maybe answer questions you have about your CVs about should you or should you not add a certain section or not. We can discuss that. And then just give you some other feedback that I've gained over the years from other faculty members about their CVs and just inquiring input. And so that's all I've been doing for 18 years, is just asking questions of other faculty members about their CVs. And that's how I'm going to present today. And then we're going to end with applicant tracking systems and resumes. As a complement to your CV, I believe we should all have a resume because certain scholarships, certain applications for maybe community involvement, there are other things that a resume can be useful for. And so it's also good to have a complementary resume to accompany your CV if needed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those applicant tracking systems and what those are and how those work a little bit. So does anybody have any questions before we get started? I don't think this will take the whole hour and a half, but unless we just get into a really rich discussion about things, and that'd be great, but otherwise we'll go. So another faculty member at Texas Tech University, he's brilliant. He is well published. I don't believe he's a Horn professor, but he's probably, he could be close. If we could designate another Horn professor, I bet he would qualify to be one. And I heard a rumor that his CV was about 800 pages long. And so I spoke to his freshman seminar class. He teaches a Rater Ready class. And I've been speaking to his freshmen or first year students for about 6 years now. And after I heard this rumor, I approached him and I said, is it true that your CV is 800 pages long? And he kind of belly laughed and chuckled and said, no, it's not 800 pages long. And I was kind of like, oh, okay. And then I didn't even ask how long it was. He just looked at me and said, it's about 378 pages. And I just said, "What do you put in it?" He said, "Everything I do. Every little thing, every published article, every class I teach, every presentation, every grad student I work with, he documents everything." And so for his specific field, he's not in human sciences, but for his specific field, I started asking around about other CVs, and they are hundreds of pages long. And it blew my mind because I had not experienced that. I thought the 62-page chemistry professor was quite extensive. And so for us, I think my CV is about 5 or 6 pages long. It doesn't have to be, it's not about length. It's about perception, I believe. A lot of the way other faculty and other universities will take in your CV is with a certain perception. How do you want to showcase yourself? How do you want to display yourself on this piece of paper where they haven't even met you before? And so, with a CV, one of the first things I'm going to cover, first of three, is the impact. Okay. And so, when you first, let's say if you've ever been on a search committee, I know Dr. Alexander, Dr. Miller, Dr. Roberson, when you're on a search committee and you get an application in, you're going to be impacted in one way or another by the faculty member's CV. Okay. And typically it's going to be the way it's formatted, the way it looks. Do you even want to read it or not? Is the font a 12 or 11-point font, or is it a 6-point font? I've seen all of the above. Is it 50 pages? Is it 5 pages? What do you want to read? What do you want to see highlighted? And so that impact, the moment of impact is very important. And so when it comes to your format and the way it looks, I think, and there have been some studies done on the psychological effect or the way the brain takes in these documents. And so it needs to be orderly. It needs to be organized. The font needs to be consistent. The margins need to be consistent. All of your master's thesis, your doctoral dissertation work, all of that formatting matters when it comes to your CV as well. Your CV should be formatted impeccably. Don't just throw in everything in the kitchen sink into the document without any formatting or spacing or bolding or italics, because that won't appeal to the reader. And the main goal is to appeal to the reader. You're wanting the job, you're wanting the scholarship, you're wanting the research opportunity or the grant. And so you need to have everything meticulously formatted and spell checked. One of the things I like to do with spell checking is read it backwards. I learned this in my journalism undergrad class, where we had to write a press release we had a lab class. It was 3 hours long. We had to cover a breaking news story and then write a press release in those 3 hours. And if you had one misspelled word, you got a 0, just no credit. You got an F, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we had to type in Microsoft Works, which I don't know exists anymore, but Microsoft Works did not have spell check. And so you really had to concentrate on your spelling. And the way our professor taught us is to read your press release backwards. We get used to reading top to bottom, left to right. And if you look at your own CV right now, and maybe on page 2 or 3 or 4, if you start scanning the bottom of the page, what I find when I critique resumes and CVs, this is where many of the mistakes occur, at the bottom. Because when we read, we get used to what we read. It becomes familiar. And have you ever seen that email? It's a block email and every word is misspelled, but you can comprehend it. You know what it's saying because all they did was switch the letters in the middle of each word, right? And you can still comprehend it, but you notice that it's wrong, right? And that's what happens with your resume or your CV, is that you've read it so many times it becomes familiar. You may have a misused word or a misspelled word and you don't even know it because of the familiarity, and you know what it's supposed to say, right? And so it's fine. Well, I've critiqued many CVs with many different types of misspellings, and I'll show you an example here in a minute. But I just wanted to cover that. That's part of the impact, okay? The number 2 thing that's most important in your CV is the presentation. This is very similar to impact, the way it's presented, but the thing I want you to focus on with presentation is the order. Okay, how is the document presented? Is your education first? Is your doctoral or your master's level education first, and then your bachelor's? Um, or is it a lot of CVs come in and I see their bachelor's degree first, their master's second, and then their doctoral degree? I'm like, let's highlight the doctoral degree first. Let's put it in order of importance, and that's the way you want to have everything. You want to highlight your successes on that first page, maybe your major publications versus other publications if you're highly published. Maybe you want to highlight a certain grant that you've received, things that'll make you stand out, because again, this impact, the way they look at your document in that first 10 seconds, the first probably half to 2/3 of the page is what they're going to remember most. And so when you present the document, that presentation matters as well. You don't want to have old jobs first. You want to put your most recent research, your most recent teaching position, whatever it is, you want to highlight those things first. So presentation matters. And then the third thing that is going to be more um, arduous, I guess, is your content, your word choice, how you describe your research, how you describe your research interests, how you describe your conferences and your publications and your presentations, all of the above. The way you word things and the types of action verbs, the types of language you use is going to be really important too. And what I like to do is to play devil's advocate with people. And so, Jinsey, if I use you as an example and I'm reading your um, CV, I might pick on you and say, do you want to use this particular action verb? You taught undergraduate students. Is there a better word to use than taught, right? I think I learned a lot of this from my edits in my dissertation. Thanks, Dr. Alexander, where I could have used a lot of many better words than I did in the original version. And so word choice really matters on the way you describe what you do. And so impact, presentation, content, those are really the three things I critique when I look at a CV and I start going through it. I'm gonna give feedback on the impact. It seems jumbled to me. I can't find anything, nothing's organized. The presentation, similar thing. And then the content, we'll get down to the nitty-gritty and read things and make sure they make sense. Make sure your tenses are correct. If you're in a current research project, you should have present tense, verbs, and information. If you've achieved something in the past, it needs to be past tense. You need to make sure those are correct. And so the document really can be scrutinized over and over and over again by multiple people. And I think it should be. I think your faculty members should look at it. I think a career counselor should look at it. I think, if you've got a partner, friend, somebody around close that can look at it for you and look at it with an eye of critique, make them try to find mistakes. That's the best way to go about your document to make sure it's ready to go and ready to send off. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point before I show you some examples and continue on with the CVs? Dr. Alexander.
Thank you, Dr. Killough. So we use digital measures, as you are familiar probably. And I don't always like how it formats the document, and there really isn't any way you can select the order. If you're using that particular Vita, it requires, quite a bit of organization. But one thing I have learned is that if you have a misspelling in digital measures, it's going to translate onto the Vita. And so I've been surprised when I found some misspelled words there. So I've had to go back and fix those. So do you, for faculty, recommend that we do something in addition to the digital measures, or is it fine just to focus in on the one that we have through that service.
To be honest with you, I think you can have a separate one, and I recommend it. I filled out my faculty form in digital measures, and I don't ever use it other than for Texas Tech purposes. If I have to send my CV out to other people, I use my Word document that I created, and then I save it as a new PDF. And this is some new information that I've just learned recently that I want to share with y'all. I was going to save it till later, but I do have my own format that I use when I send it off to other things that I use my CV for. But for Texas Tech's purposes, you kind of got to use the format. And I know for syllabi, you can attach Word documents. Can you not attach a separate CV within digital measure?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can, yes, I mean, you can attach, but, and this is I probably know this because I have been most familiar with digital measures, whereas my colleagues are relatively new. There's a function where you run reports, and one of them that you can run is your Vita. And then there's one or two different formats, but a lot of times we're asked to, as an administrator, collect the Vita for our faculty, and we really rely a lot on that digital measures piece, and so it's not necessarily the most attractive.
Right. And for that reason, that's why I have my own format as well, that I like to pick and choose and format myself to send to people. But for your purpose, I think it does fit the bill, because you're also not necessarily hiring, you're just having it on file, right? And downloading it to, I'm still not sure what digital measures, I guess state reporting, you have to, it's state mandated, correct?
Well, yes, I mean, it's for state reporting, but you know, when you are applying for a grant, for instance, other kinds of things you do need to provide a lot of times, resume, Vita. I usually scale back format on that one. Like I usually only do like a 3 or 4 page one with things that pertain to the grant that I'm applying for. And then, of course, if you're doing a federal grant, you have to do the bio sketch, which that's a whole different thing too. So anyway, I was just curious if you had any familiarity with digital measures, because it's, it's a good thing, but it's also one of those
limiting,
kind of cumbersome in terms of working with and formatting. So.
And with all those types of templates, I would consider it a template type of program. They are going to be limiting in what you can do. So I've always told students, have a master document that includes anything and everything you've ever done, which is your CV. But I think Dr. Alexander makes a good point. Sometimes you don't want to send the whole thing. You don't want to send the whole master document. So you can copy and paste just the important information that is necessary for the grant or for the scholarship or the application for what's needed from that master document. And so if you don't already have a file on your computer, a resume or CV file, and have multiple renditions of your document, I highly recommend it. It's fun to look at as well. I was having a clean out moment of my hard drive and started looking at my original resumes when I first started at Tech, and it was interesting to see the progression, the evolution of the document over the years. And I probably had about 50 different versions over the years, which was fun to read. So it's kind of a nice little historical collection too, that you can keep. But I do recommend having your own version in Word, but with digital measures and other software that you have to fill in the blanks, plug and play with it, you can just use that master document and add things in as you go. Is a good way to go about that as well. Any other questions or comments? And the other thing is these CVs, and Dr. Alexander, I'm sure you know too, they're but outside of digital measures, there are many different ways you can do this. There's not one right way or wrong way. It's just needs to be impactful, have a strategic presentation, meaning it needs to be ordered in a way that is in order of importance and highlighting your best assets, your best attributes um, for the job at hand, so to speak, of whether it's a grant or a scholarship or a job. And then the content, again, you really just need to be meticulous the way you critique it and have others critique it, read it backwards to catch those misused or misspelled words. So I want to share my screen with you and see, so I can show you a service on our website that you can use. So on our Career Center website, can you see this? If you go to the just University Career Center, we have some COVID career resources that are new that we just added, our career assessments, professional document writing. If you click on that professional document writing and scroll down to this little drop down here, we have CV tips, okay? You bring down the accordion and it just gives you a few little, if you're in the mode right now of developing your CV or critiquing, editing your CV, you might want to look at this and go through some of the information that we provide you. The main goal is to present a snapshot of you when you're not present and to help you get that interview or the grant or the scholarship. Every style is different, lengths are different. Here are some different headings that you can use. And if you scroll down, we have just a little sample. And again, this is a very basic sample just to get people started. So you've got your name. You want your name maybe a little bit bigger and bolder. I always thought of a name on a CV or resume as a title of a movie poster. When you go to Tinseltown or, gosh, I'm not a movie goer. I can't even think of what's the place where you can eat when you watch a movie. I just went blank. Anyway, doesn't matter. But you see the movie posters outside, you see the title of the movie poster first, right? It's a big and bold in lights. I feel like your name should be that way. A lot of people put their name on their CV in 12-point font, not bolded, and I almost kind of have to look for it. And so, make sure your name is there. Make sure your current address, city, state, phone, I need to take fax out of there. That's old. But your email address, you need to make sure all that information is correct. And again, being meticulous, there are a lot of people who will miss a digit in their phone number, and all of a sudden there's a missing digit, and they'll just forget it. Maybe their keyboard stuck when they were typing it and they just didn't realize it. But in their head, they've typed their phone number a million times and they just don't know it. So little things like that. Here we've got education laid out in a particular way, including the city and the state, if you've defended or not, the title of your dissertation, maybe your supervisor committee members, your master's degree, your bachelor's degree, excuse me. Maybe put your research interests, research experience, teaching expertise, teaching experience, awards, professional organizations, community involvement. I want to stop right here for a second. If you notice at the bottom of page 3 here, community involvement is in all caps, okay? One of the things that Microsoft Word does not do is spell check capital word or capital typing. And so involvement in undergraduate resumes, I find misspelled about once a week, and I'm not kidding. They'll spell it INVOLVMENT, and they'll just forget an E, or activities will be ACTIVITES instead of IES. Extracurricular is just butchered quite often. And so if your titles are all capped like this, make sure they're spelled correctly and not maybe a misused word. If you've been a manager, my joke that I always tell undergrad students in their resume workshops is, you don't believe how many mangers there are on this campus because they misspell manager, but they don't know it because spell check doesn't catch it. It's just up on the list here. So if you will excuse me just 1 second, I've got a visitor. Hi, Elise, do you want to say hi? What are you doing?
Good.
Can you say hi to everybody?
Hi.
Okay, can you go watch your movie? Danielle, be quiet. So the all caps titles are something that you want to pay attention to if you've got them, and make sure that they are not misspelled or misused. Your publications, presentations, abstracts, you want to make sure you've got all those listed. And if you've got numerous publications, you might want to break the section up. You know, if you've got pages upon pages of publications after publications, do you want to read that? Just a bunch of APA style cited publications. If you've got dozens of publications, you might want to pull out the major publications, the ones that are reviewed the most, the ones that are downloaded the most. And you might want to make a section at the beginning of the document and have a heading for major publications and just list 4 or 5, and then have your dozens of others later in the document. Same thing with classes taught. You know, if you've taught many classes over the years, you might want to just break up the ones that are most recent and the ones that are most important, maybe classes you've created, and highlight those first, and then your other classes taught later in the document. So there's no rhyme or reason to how you build this. It's more of a fact of being strategic in doing so. You want to make sure that you're very meticulous when you list things and how you list them. And one of the ways you can do that is by reading the instructions for the grant or the job and see what they're needing. You know, if you're applying to be a faculty member at South Plains College versus maybe Ohio State University, they might look for different things, and they might want to see more teaching experience at South Plains. They might want to see more of your research that you've done at Ohio State. So you want to make sure that the appropriate information is provided to the appropriate job, or again, grant, scholarship, whatever. And so you can rearrange it however you'd like. You just want to showcase yourself in a way that sells yourself, and that's going to grab their attention through that impact that matters most. Okay. And so we have this very simple document on our website if you want to refer to it to get you started. But again, we're always happy to critique your CVs. I'd be happy to read it and go over it with you, talk it through with you as we go. And I'll just ask you questions. Is this something you want to highlight first? Or is this something that could be later in the document and you could put something else first? And I'll just ask you a lot of questions as we go through the CV. Let's see. Any questions or comments there? The next thing I want to show you is, or talk to you about, are these applicant tracking systems. This is primarily for jobs you apply to. If you're going to be looking at being a faculty member at another university, Texas Tech has an applicant tracking system where a software reads your document before it's passed on or referred to a hiring manager. And if you don't meet the requirements in the application process through the application and the document, you won't get referred. And applicant tracking systems in the real world work the same way. We use a really cool new software called Quincia. Can you see this resume analysis document that I'm looking at? Quincia is a new artificial intelligence resume reader, and it will critique a CV, but at this point in time, I don't recommend using Quincia for a CV because all we have are about 300 resumes in the system. And what it's doing is it's comparing your resume, Kyle, to these 300 other resumes. It's not comparing to CVs yet. We haven't developed that yet. But I wanted to talk about the general way an applicant tracking system works. I wanted to start with this one first. An applicant tracking system, basically, 98% of Fortune 500 companies use it, and many other smaller companies use it. And basically, it's a way for standardization of applications and resumes. If I'm a hiring manager and I want somebody with a master's degree in education and who has taught for 5 years, I can type that programming into my applicant tracking system and train it to look for those types of resumes or CVs. And if you don't have that information stated very directly on your resume or CV, you won't get passed through to a person. The computer stops you at that point. And so applicant tracking systems have gotten better over the years, but they're still very picky. A lot of applicant tracking systems will kick your resume out if it is if it has images, if it has tables, because the software can't read the tables. If you have text boxes where you formatted something fancy, your resume or CV is going to get kicked out because the applicant tracking system is basically going to read text only. And if a JPEG image or other types of formatting is behind the scenes, you run the risk of not getting passed along to a person to actually get the interview. And so with applicant tracking systems, they also look at your keywords, your content. Again, if I type in a dozen keywords, hardworking, responsible, critical thinking skills, professionalism, if I type that into my applicant tracking system and you don't have those words in your document, you won't get passed on because it's going to see you as not relevant. And so typically when it comes to applying to a job, what you need to do is scan the job description and include those words into the experience you've had in the past. So for example, let's say that you've worked in customer service a long time ago, right? And you have customer service representative as a title for one of your jobs, but the job you're applying to asks for client relationships, or maybe a different word. It's the same thing, it's just slightly worded different. I would go back in and change your customer service to client relationships. So that way the applicant tracking system reads the document and says, oh, this person they've got the experience we need. Okay, now this gets a little bit gray because you don't want to lie, you don't want to stretch it too far and pretend you have experience that you don't, just to beat the applicant tracking system. But you do want to use some of the language that is used in the application, or in the job description, sorry, if you can. You want to carefully tailor your resume or CV to the job description every single time you apply. Use the chronological order. Don't use tables or columns. I see a lot of people use Microsoft Word templates to get started, even with CVs. I don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend using Canva. I don't recommend other types of CV generators. You need to do it in Microsoft Word as a .docx to originally start your document. Then the way the applicant tracking system works, a job is created, a job is going to be published, you're going to apply, they're going to be screened by this computer system, and then here's the cycle of the applicant tracking system. And so it's very important to know that when you apply somewhere or send Dr. Alexander, do you know if grants use tracking systems like this to consolidate things or to standardize things? I'm
not aware of them doing that, because it would have to be pulled out separate from the grant application. And so usually what happens is those go in as one document that is complete, like a PDF. Like the one I just submitted this last week was about 375 pages, and it was a PDF file.
Okay.
And then with Cayuse does the same thing. It's just that each part is added separately, and then it checks off in the system and then it's transmitted to the federal agencies as a single PDF.
Got it.
So for a resume or vita, it would, you know, would have to sort through all those other pages to find it. But I will tell you on a federal grant that they're very particular on the table, the template that you use, and you need to use there's a NSF, there's a federal grant site for putting together your bio sketch. And depending on which agency, like U.S. Department of Education has one option. Cindy knows this because we've done this on one of ours, and it's a similar system, but NSF then prints it in a different way. So it depends on the grant that you're applying for, and the information is in the system, and then it prints it off in its template that it's expecting. And if it's not on that template, it will get rejected.
Got it. And so the PDF information, I think, is very important too when it comes to these applicant tracking systems and other usage of PDFs. Through Quincia, their CEO, Hamal, he posted a video on LinkedIn just this past week, and basically saying that not all PDFs are created equal. And so I clicked on it and I watched it, and it's a little 5-minute clip. And basically what he talked about is, we've all been told whenever you submit something, you need to save it as a PDF before you send it, right? And I tell students this all the time, grad students, undergrad students, you know, save your resume, save your CV as a PDF, and then send it on. Well, some people like to be creative, and they'll create their CV in Canva, and then they'll convert it to a PDF. Or maybe some of the media comm students like to use InDesign, and especially advertising, and they'll create this really spectacular looking document and save it as a PDF. When you use other systems and convert a document to a PDF, it doesn't always pass the applicant tracking system test. The only way that Hamal instructed us that a PDF works is that if it's created in Word as a .docx first, and then saved as a Word PDF, because that text can then be translated into an applicant tracking system. So if you're applying for jobs specifically, make sure, again, you use the .docx Word format to create the document, and then save as a PDF. He also mentioned that PDFs decay over time. So if it's been 3 years since you last saved your CV as a PDF and you've just been sending it off, a lot of times the way an applicant tracking system will read it is just random characters. It will lose the actual text because of the way Acrobat, Adobe updates every 3 months, it seems. Those old PDFs are no good anymore. And so whenever you send a new CV off, make sure you refresh the document in Word as a .docx first, save as a new PDF, and then send it off to make sure it's the most up-to-date PDF. Because yeah, they do decay. I didn't know that. I thought digital was digital, but apparently it is not. The way you can do this, I don't have a PDF pulled up, but let me see if I can. Here's a United Way internship that we posted today. It was sent to me in a PDF file. And if I put, can you see this share? I need to stop this share and start a new share. Hold on just a second. Okay. Here is a PDF document I received this morning for an internship. So if any of you know of any undergrads, HDFS or other related majors, FCS, I think this would be a wonderful internship opportunity. We posted it on Higher Ed Raters. But the way to test if a PDF is going to be read by a applicant tracking system is you can just put your cursor on the text. And if it highlights each line like it's doing here, this type of PDF will be read by a PDF. If I look at this one will probably do the same thing. That's the same. This should be the same because I wrote in the letter. So all those would be read by an applicant tracking system. Have you ever opened a PDF and tried to copy and paste the text and it just copies a text box? If you open your PDF and highlight it and it's just a big text box, that is an indicator that your PDF will not be read by an applicant tracking system when applying. And most universities have them. So make sure that you can copy each line and paste the text, because that's essentially what the applicant tracking system is doing. And it's probably doing much what digital measures is like, is it's pulling your work history, your awards, and it's putting it into sections in the internal applicant tracking system. And then if it populates all those fields in the applicant tracking system, there's a good chance you'll get seen by a person and moved on to the next phase of the application process. But if your PDF is old and it's just a text box, there's no way it can input that data. So you want to make sure your PDFs are up to date.
Well, I would say that's why a table wouldn't read, because a table is not going to do line by line. It's going to chunk it.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to redo my Vita. My non-digital measure ones is actually set up on a table format, because that's what was recommended long ago when I was actually a graduate student, to make sure that the text didn't jump and
right.
for uniformity, consistency.
Right.
That was actually prior to the days of PDFs. So
right. So those tables will now get you kicked out. The columns, same thing. If you've got 2 columns in your CV, that'll get you kicked out as well.
So nobody use mine as an example anymore, okay?
Sounds good. So that's really all I have about CVs. I'd like to open it up and see about your particular questions about sections. Maybe that's a common question I get from faculty members about, what sections do I include? Are there any questions about the formatting or about your particular CV that you have?
Well, I guess my question would be, what if you are just starting and you only have like one publication? Like, why you wouldn't create a whole section for one item, right? Or could you combine them to
I would create a section. I would have a publication section and have that one publication there, because I mean, that's what you've got. And you want to highlight it because depending on what you're applying to, maybe not everybody has multiple publications, depending on the level of job you're applying to, and so some people might see that as a good thing that you have a publication where others do not. So I recommend highlighting that and making it its own section.
So one thing as a developing faculty member, new faculty member, especially graduate students who are preparing and seeking a faculty position, if you have limited publications, one of the things you may want to think about, and one is better than none, okay? And then you may want to show some that you have in progress or manuscripts in progress, because that's another section that you could add. And Jency, you have some manuscripts in progress. The one that you did in the spring or in the fall is an example. But you might just have a section that's like research productivity or research contributions. And then you could have publications, presentations, poster sessions, that kind of thing. And maybe it's not as obvious, but it's in that category of research productivity, if that makes sense. Like Dr. Killough said, there's not really one right way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times your guiding light or your North Star of how to title those sections or how to break them up will be in the details of the job description, or they'll say specifically what they're looking for. And so if they're asking for research productivity, use that as your heading. Or if they're looking for manuscripts, use that as, you can use the job description or the details that the employer supplies as your kind of guide of how you should title your sections and label your sections.
So I know we're supposed to really focus in just on the Vitas, but generally, at least in academia, you often have a letter of application that you provide along with your Vita. And so that is an area where you could just indicate, you know, in my current position, I've not had a lot of opportunities for research productivity. However, I've published and I have these manuscripts underway. I mean, so in a cover letter, you can actually provide somewhat of that written explanation if you feel like something needs more attention or maybe explanation. So Dr. Killough, what would you say about that?
I would agree with that. And the way you say it matters. And so I want to take a little spin on what you suggested. And instead of saying, I don't have this particular research productivity, say, my research productivity is developing or it's underway, and say it not in a negative tense, I don't have, but I do have it, it's just not developed yet. Or I'm beginning the research development process or the publication process. But I look forward to continuing it at your place of, at your school. I look forward to the opportunity to contribute to your job and put it as a selling point that this is your goal, is you want the experience to come from their faculty position or something like that, and that you're willing and ready to provide it. But it depends on the way you say it. If you just say, I don't, like I see a lot of students say, I don't have any experience in this area. Well, I'm done reading. Like, if you tell me that you don't have any experience, say, my experience might be limited. However, what I want to do next is gain, I'm excited by the opportunity to gain this experience. And so the way you word it, it takes a bit of wordsmithing to make sure it's perceived the right way by the reader, and that they want to maybe give you a chance. Maybe if you're underqualified a little bit. I've seen people who get the job who are underqualified because of the genuineness, the way they state their, the way they present themselves in that cover letter or that application letter. Good question. Is there a chat? I see that. Oh, Alamo. Yes. Sorry. Thanks.
That's what they are. You were talking about that you sit in and eat dinner at, or at least here in Lubbock, it's called the Alamo Draft House. I just finally remember the last part of that just a little while ago. So
I can remember it.
Jay, are you seeing, and I'm just hearing rumors, I'm not sure if this is something that's down the line, but I'm hearing artificial intelligence being a more possible way of companies also doing applicant tracking as well, not just with the I mean, because now we have companies also that ask you to send a video to introduce yourself, and that type of thing. And I mean, we have that even now in teaching and so forth. Yes. So, and they ask you to answer these questions in your video, and then they'll let you know if they want to contact you for further interviews and that type of thing and so forth. So I think that's something we all need to be aware of too, as well. Because I noticed some companies looking at that on the artificial intelligence side, but also I just think it's interesting. I mean, and even on the applicant tracking, where they're using artificial intelligence to help better see where it's not so specific as you mentioned that, even if they use, because there are some companies that like to see the graphics, like in advertising and graphic design and those types of things. And so that limits them if they can't read all the words. And so that's why I'm hearing the rumors of doing artificial intelligence instead, so they can grasp the whole thing and see if that candidate is someone they would like to interview.
Yep. No, you're right. And I would really love to talk to some of your classes and invite y'all to maybe your student teachers, and maybe another, is it not practicum, but maybe one of your other classes. But Quincy also has a mock interview portion. And I think it's the best part of the software because I teach the human sciences capstone course, and I make all of my students do it for the past 2 semesters. We just started it, piloted it last semester. I'm sorry, in the spring of 2020, used it in the fall of 2020, and now we're using it again. And so I've had 120 students in last spring and last fall. So 240 students participate in this mock interview, and the majority of them love it because the artificial intelligence video software is amazing. It will not only critique your content of what you say, but it will critique your facial expressions, your micro expressions, your background. Like, for example, if I turn on my fan, all of a sudden that becomes a distraction because you see this rotating shadow above my head. I don't know if you can see it like I can, but the Quincy software will pick up on that and talk about how your background is not well lit or there are distracting elements. It will say that, Jermaine, you have had 96% positive smiles throughout your interview. It will say, Kyle, you've been you've had 20% of eye contact. It'll say, Nicole, you look joyful in your micro expressions. I've had it also tell students they look disgusted in their micro expressions because they're not prepared for the mock interview. And so they just, what we have found is that when we're on Zoom and you're not talking and you're just listening, you have your facial muscles just relax and it looks like you're disinterested. Like if I'm just listening, you know, I look maybe disgusted. And so having an active smile while you're listening, you see everybody smiles now. It's very important that when you're interviewing or videoing your interview that you smile throughout, even when the software is asking you questions, because it picks up on those things. Your eye contact, your filler words, your marketable skills, it'll pick up on your hard skills and your soft skills. And the software gives a report to the students and it tells them all of those things. And then it gives them a score based on an aggregate score from the rest of the users of the software and says, here's where you fared with other users. And the students really like it. They really hate the thought of doing it. They all complain that they don't want to do it. But then when it's done, they're like, that was really helpful. And so it's really the AI interviewing, I think, is something that's going to take over. And especially during this time, Dr. Miller, all we're doing right now and all we're seeing from employers is virtual interviews. Everybody is using Zoom. Everybody's using Teams. Everybody's using their proprietary software that they have. And the few in-person interviews we had scheduled for the fall all got switched over to virtual. And that's, I feel, the way we're going to be, because now employers are noticing that, oh, they can save a lot of money not traveling. And they're going to, even when we go back in person, we have had a good number of employers say they are going to come back in person because they value the face-to-face, but they're also going to supplement the face-to-face interviews with virtual interviews as pre-screens instead of phone interviews as pre-screens or something. So I think the virtual interviewing and the AI interviewing is something that will be here to stay. So we would love if you just let me know if you're interested in using the Quincy software for your class. All I need is your students' emails, because each student will get a specific email inviting them to use Quincy. They first have to upload their resume and they'll get an AI resume critique. And then they'll be able to set up their AI mock interview and get an interview critique, which is really helpful. Even if they're doing in-person interviews, the AI critique is good because it will tell them about their filler words. That's one I forgot to mention. It will say you had 702 filler words out of 15,000 words that you used. Or, I mean, it counts them, and it will display them to this. You said 80 times. Like it's really neat.
I used it with our career prep students, the ones that you came and talked to about their teaching resume and so forth, and asked them to go and do that mock interview that you have on your Career Center site. And so some of them were, like you said, very hesitant, but after they'd done it, they said they kept going in there and redoing it because they realized some things that they kept doing over and over, and they go, oh, I've got to smile more, or I've got to stop saying, or I've got to stop twisting my hair.
Yes.
All those kind of things.
Yes. It's funny how we don't see ourselves.
Well, and even the way they answered certain interview questions, they got better ideas about that they didn't think about when they were answering, you know, why should I hire you? And those kind of.
And the other, sorry, I got to say one more thing. The other funny thing, as an administrator, I can watch the interviews and grade them. And what happens is Quincia is asking interview questions based on the student resume that is uploaded. So it will say, Dr. Alexander, tell me about yourself and your most recent grant writing experience at Texas Tech University, if that's on your document that you uploaded, right? And then you get a minute or so to answer. And then what happens is Quincia, the software, speaks back to you and says, that was pretty good, but I think you can do better. And the student's reaction is like, I mean, they're like, whoa, they're grading me in real time. And the software will say, you didn't mention this, or you didn't mention that. Next time when you answer the question, be sure to include the pertinent information. And the students are like, so that first question always gets them because they're not prepared, they're not ready. They haven't seen a demo, they don't know, you know, I just assign it and say, sign up and, you know, go through the process. And so when it starts giving them feedback in real time, they get kind of stunned.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I just did a training for another university where it was about helping students that were dealing with social issues or depression in the classroom and how to identify it. And although it wasn't AI as far as like reading my facial expressions, you had to type responses, and the computer immediately kicked back, well, why would you want to say that to them? That might, you know, make them, whatever the reasoning is, you know, go the direction you don't want them to go. So it's training you to lead them to wanting to find help outside of the classroom. And it was all based off what I type in real fast, and it just read it real quick and, you know, gave you a response to say, you might want to word it this way to them. Is pretty interesting. But, hey, I'm going to apologize for my lack of eye contact. Okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
I know you were, but I'm looking over my resume or my Vita, and I was making notes on it based off what you said. And two things pop out at me that I want. So when you say text box, because mine has always had these text box that are the title. So that text box and anything that's uploaded is not showing up. So they just have to, but the text below it that is in the Word document is. So they just have to ascertain, oh, obviously with the information there, that must have had something there that's talked about education. So well, taking those out and just replacing it with the text education will fix that, right?
Correct. And the thing is that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the software won't ascertain the text beneath the text boxes. It'll just kick you out. And so,
so you're just kicked out.
Yeah, if there are unfamiliar format. And the other thing that I need to mention is all ATSs are not created the same either. Depending on how much money the company wants to, or how much money the school wants to invest in an applicant tracking system. And I know for Texas Tech, they use Brass Ring, which was a state low bid, which is, we had Brass Ring as a career center 20 years ago, and we got rid of it because it was the worst software in the world. And then Texas Tech bought it because it was the lowest bid. That's just the way things go. And so you get what you pay for. And some of these companies who can afford better applicant tracking systems It depends on how the tracking system is set up, and it might be able to ascertain, but most of them, what I've learned about it, will just kick you out and you won't even progress to the next.
You're not even going to
level.
progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, so the one other thing I wanted to ask you about, based off some of the things you said, was so consistency. So most of my stuff is in a chronological order based off what I want them to see first as most important. Doctorate degree first, my last job, you know, or most recent job. But when I get down to my articles and my research funds that I've received over the years, or my program funds that I've applied for, grants and such, I have them listed as the oldest down to the, so I've basically just been adding to the bottom versus adding to the top.
I'd
So
flip it.
so okay, that's what I was saying. So from what you're saying, I need to flip that and get the most recent stuff up top and do that. Dr. Alexander shaking her head because I just turned this in. So I will send you a new one, Dr. Alexander, if it's not too late. So yeah, so I wanted to check on that. And then the dates, are dates important as in date of year, or should you also include the month on all that stuff?
It depends on the job. In the job sections, I would have the months, and because if you look in like an Excel document, okay, there's a specific formatting. If you go to format document, there are many different options where you can have month, day, year, day, month, year, if you're European, I guess, or you can have it spelled out. And so these applicant tracking systems, if you think the way Excel is formatted, it's only going to read those maybe 5 or 6 different date formats. And if I'm not mistaken, I did this about a week ago. All of the formats include a month and a year at least. And so I would recommend having the month and the year, not just a year, because if the software doesn't, if it's told to look at month and year and you only put year, that might be what it's saying. Well, we don't know when this happened. And so and it's doing no harm in adding the month either, if you can be approximate. If something was a long time ago, you might try to do your best to approximate it maybe, but I would recommend in the jobs having the month. In the publications and maybe other things, I like consistency, and I would still add the months and the year, but that's me. That's probably an arguable point. I bet there are people out there who just put years on old awards and things. So I don't. That's a good question. I don't know. I like consistency though. If I read it one time, I want to see it the same way every time.
Sure.
So on the grant section, and this is, I think, of importance at an Research One institution. When I went up for tenure, I redid my vita, and what I included under the grants section, of course, I had 2 sections, funded and unfunded, because even if you have unfunded grants, you still want them listed on your vita, because that shows effort and the fact that you are applying for grants, and that for instance, at the federal level, the rate of funding is like 10%. And so, you know, you have to resubmit and resubmit and resubmit. And Dr. Durandahar up in Nutritional Sciences, he makes his new faculty, encourages new faculty, doesn't make them, but encourages his new faculty to submit 10 grant applications a year. Think about that, you all. I mean, I about died last week trying to do the one. And Cindy knows what I'm talking about right now because she's in the midst. But can you imagine doing 10? Because his philosophy is, if only 10% are accepted, if you submit 10, then you may actually get a funded grant. And we don't go that far in FCSE. However, what I would say is making sure that you are indicating what you've applied for, and if it's been unfunded, just so that you're showing that you have made that effort. And then under the grant section, I have a running total of the funding that I have received for my career and at Texas Tech. So I have 2 lines. So it shows, because when I went up for tenure, I wanted the review committee to know that I had over $3 million in grant funding. Because when they looked at my Vita, I only had 10 publications, and I wanted them to see, okay, well, maybe, you know, I had like 1 in press and the rest, the 9, and, you know, for people who on the review committee sit there and count publications, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep. Okay. They should get tenure because they have, you know, 10, 15 publications. I wanted them to understand, yes, I had publications, but you also have to recognize that as a junior faculty member, I had over $3 million in grant funding, and consistent from the year I came until the time I went up for tenure. And so, you know, those are some things that you can kind of subtly put there. And you know, at Tech right now, I know in the letter of offer that our new faculty received, it did indicate that you must apply for a federal grant before you go up for tenure. Didn't say you had to secure one, but it said you must apply. So that's going to be something that they're going to be looking for on your Vita when it's time to go up for tenure. Is there a federal grant application that they have applied for? It might be unfunded, but it's there.
Right.
And that's Texas Tech in a Research One environment right now. If I were at Stephen F. Austin, I probably wouldn't be as concerned about that, because that's not what, you know, they're necessarily emphasizing. I probably would focus more on my teaching, you know, some of the publications that I have, but the, you know, the teaching evaluations, the number of students, the advisees, because that's a teaching institution, not a research institution.
Yes. Sell what you've got. You know, promote what you have, highlight what you have, put your best foot forward. I think that's very good information. And that would be a section on the Vita if you're applying at Tech for tenure.
So even from the previous university I was at, which is a teaching university, I did apply. We did actually apply for federal funding. So I need to have that on my Vita. Is that correct? Okay, because I think I took that off because I thought it was, since it was from another university.
Well, so it won't count towards going up for tenure, but what it does show your career, and there'll be a very clear indication in your dossier, because your dossier is a separate document, that what you've done at Texas Tech, it will showcase what you've done at Texas Tech. But like Dr. Killough said, your Vita should be a running historical document of what you have accomplished. And so if you have things from other universities or other employment that are pertinent to what you do now, those should be there.
Okay.
Because I have things from Ohio State, awards that I won. I have grants that I received at the University of Kentucky, but it's clearly identified that that was at the University of Kentucky, at Ohio State University, that kind of thing. And that's just on my Vita. Those things did not go in my dossier as evidence for tenure, but they were on my overall Vita. So put them back.
Yeah. And that's kind of what that was my goal with mentioning the other faculty member with the 370-page Vita, is that, you know, having, and he said, I put everything I do. That, I think that holds true, is that you need to include all of those things, just as a historical document of, and then you can copy and paste what you want when you're applying for certain things.
It's amazing after a while how much you forget what you've done, and having that historical record, you know, oh yeah, I totally forgot about this. Even the further you get along in your career, a year into it, I'm kind of like, oh, I totally forgot about that. I did that in January. Oh gosh, I didn't get that on my Vita. And so, you know, it's good that Tech actually makes us do an annual update of things, because when you're working and you've got so much going on, it is easy to forget some of these things that are important.
And based off something that Dr. Alexander said, I will bring up another point, and it was a webinar or something I listened to earlier in the year. Due to COVID and all the cancellations of conferences and stuff like that, that you still list something you were expecting to present at and just put it was canceled due to COVID, and put some little statement in there so they know that you had done the work to prepare for that, but you didn't get the opportunity to present, but it can still show that you were trying to get your, your work out there. So just another point that if nobody's hadn't heard that.
That might be an interview question. They might say, how did you handle or how did you adapt to preparing all this time for this and then not getting to present? What did you learn from the process? That could be something they ask you if in a face-to-face or virtual interview setting. So thank you for the discussion and the questions. Are there any other? It's good to see y'all. Oh, there's the puppy.
Any other questions anybody has? You did a great job, Dr. Killough. Super
Thank
job.
you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. And if you ever need anything, I think again, it's really the critique that matters. Talking it over with a third party is really important, because even I was thinking about the grant writing. I've contributed to some grants. They were not my grants, but I've written sections for grants for the president's office, for human sciences, for some other places. I don't have any of that on my Vita. I need to go add that, that I've contributed to those. And I wasn't even thinking, but anyway, so I think sword sharpens swords. When you can get somebody else to look at your document, it will get better as you edit it. And so be sure to keep it up to date, and be sure to, yeah, that's all I was gonna say. Be sure to keep it up to date. All right. Well, thank y'all so much. It was a pleasure visiting with you. And if you need to use Quincy or something, just let me know. Okay.
That's great. Jay. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Here. We'll see you next
Bye.
week.
Bye.